Hello. Today we're going to talk about licensure for the speech-language pathologist and learn how to transition from school to work. Soon you will be tossing your graduation cap and making decisions about the place where you will begin your professional career. But before that first day at work, you will need to understand state licensure. Watch this short video with some great advice on licensure.
Hi, I'm Sarah Pessman, and today I'm excited to share some information with you to make the search for your perfect CFY position a success. Licensure and certification can be a complicated and challenging process. There are currently 8 states that have comprehensive licensure, and many other states require a state license and teaching certificate, both with different requirements. Requirements for obtaining a state license or teaching certificate can include anything from passing basic skills tests to providing praxis scores, final graduate transcripts, proof of clinical hours, and CFY plans. A great resource for summaries of licensure and certification in your state can be found on the ASHA website at asha.org. Contact your state's licensure board or regulatory agency for exact licensure, certification, or registration requirements in your area. My personal advice when it comes to licensure is, first, familiarize yourself with licensure requirements, processes, and processing times for all states that you're interested in working in as soon as possible. If you're required to take specific tests, you may have to schedule dates in advance. Second, find out how long it will take for your school to finalize and send out final transcripts, because this will affect processing time. Third, don't expect to be fully licensed within a few short weeks. Processing times can take up to 10 weeks depending on your state. And lastly, stay up to date on where your application is in the process with all agencies that you're applying for licensure with. Be sure to ask questions about timeframes. Of course, if you have any additional questions about licensure in your state, feel free to contact Lingua Health.
To understand licensure, it's important to understand who regulates SLPs. There are several main organizations. First is our national association that we call ASHA, which stands for the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association. As you can see in the diagram below, ASHA sets the standards for the profession. This includes our university accreditation, where ASHA standards determine the program of study that you are just now completing, as well as individual certification. To learn more about individual certification, view the ASHA certification PANOPTO by following the link on the PowerPoint. ASHA also supports research. It publishes our main journals and also organizes the National Convention, where researchers from around the world present their current findings. Continuing education is a big part of ASHA. Thousands of SLPs obtain their annual continuing education units, or CEUs, at the National Convention, as well as numerous online and other continuing education opportunities. These must be reported to ASHA upon completion. And finally, advocacy. ASHA promotes the profession to the public. It provides information to members about upcoming events and things to which they need to pay attention on the national level. They also lobby for Medicare, national laws, and regulations. At the state level, there are parallel organizations, or the state speech, language, and hearing associations. They also are involved in research through the state journals and also the state convention, where researchers present their papers, including many student projects. State associations are involved in continuing education through the state convention, where participants can attend sessions presented by national and statewide experts. State associations provide other CEU opportunities throughout the year. They also are responsible for advocacy, promoting the profession, providing information to the members, and lobbying for state laws. The agencies that we're going to focus on today, however, are the state licensure boards. Every state has a licensure board, and any profession where the public is protected is regulated through licensure. The licensure boards define the allowable activities for each profession, including health professions, education, hair, construction, and so forth. Licensure boards define the boundaries between the professions, specifying which activities are the roles and duties of special education versus early childhood versus regular education versus psychology, speech-language pathology, music therapy, and so forth. The regulations define who has the license to conduct specific types of treatments. They apply sanctions for violations in ethics or regulations, and they protect consumers from unqualified service providers. For example, somebody with a degree in linguistics can't provide speech and language services unless they also meet licensure requirements. ASHA has a website showing the licensure requirements and contact information that you can access by clicking on the link provided on the PowerPoint. On the state-by-state page, you can see all of the states in alphabetical order, and these are live links on the ASHA website. When you click any one of those states, it will give you the current information that ASHA has on their state licensure. So, for example, the Louisiana link will tell you that for licensure in Louisiana, you'd have to have a master's degree or equivalent from an accredited institution. The program must have 75 hours, including 36 hours at the graduate level, 400 hours of supervised clinical practicum, and evidence of 9 months of supervised postgraduate professional employment or its part-time equivalent. Notice this means that you can't start out with the full license. You have to have a provisional license until you have worked 9 months, passed the ETS praxis exam, and completed 10 hours of continuing education, 5 of which must be in the area of licensure and 5 which may be in related areas. Louisiana is one of those states that requires certification for working in the schools, termed an ancillary certificate. At one time, speech language pathologists could work in the schools without licensure or Cs. That has changed, but the ancillary certificate still remains. An ancillary certificate is like a teacher certificate, except it's for ancillary services such as OT, PT, and SLP. It allows them to provide services in schools. The ancillary certificate allows a qualified person who is not a certified teacher to perform only those services that are allowed on your certificate. So you can't go into the classroom and do classroom teaching, although with additional coursework you could qualify as a speech-language impaired classroom in some states. These are some of the forms that you would complete for your ancillary certificate. A provisional certificate in speech pathology is valid for 3 years and is non-renewable. That means that you would have 3 years to complete the requirements for full licensure. Texas is another example. All of the states are going to be very similar, requiring the master's or doctoral degree from an accredited program, 400 hours of clinical practicum, and 36 weeks of full-time or equivalent part-time supervised professional experience. 36 weeks is equivalent to the 9-month school year. Texas also requires the passage of the examination, which is generally going to mean the praxis examination, but Texas also has the qualification that you have to successfully complete a jurisprudence examination at the time of the application. The board may waive the clinical and praxis examination requirement and grant licensure if you are a CCC holder. They require 20 hours of CEUs to renew a license for a 2-year term. Louisiana requires 10 hours per year. Another example, Florida requires a master's or doctoral degree, only 300 hours of clock hour practicum, and 9 months of full-time professional experience, passage of the praxis exam, and also completion of a course on HIV. They also have a range of certification in temporary non-renewable certifications for schools. Texas got rid of the recertification requirement, but Louisiana and Florida still maintain a form of ancillary certification. So you can see that there are differences between the states, and you must be aware of the requirements when you are exploring jobs. This is a chart available on the ASHA website that profiles the licensure and school certification requirements for SLPs. You can use that link on the PowerPoint to take you directly to this chart. It also profiles how much continuing education is required, with considerable variability between states, as you can see over on the right-hand column. Some ask for 6 semester hours, 60 clock hours annually, 150 clock hours every 5 years, etc., etc. There's the link, and it's comprehensive for all the states and the District of Columbia. So what is the difference between licensure and ASHA certification, and why do we have both? First, certification is governed by ASHA. It is a voluntary certification, not a law. However, most jobs are going to require you to have certification because often reimbursement for insurance, Medicaid, or Medicare are dependent on the SLP holding certification. Certification grants recognition to practitioners who have met the adopted standards. In contrast, licensure is mandatory in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. Its purpose is to protect the public's health, welfare, and safety. Licensure boards establish rules about the scope and practice of a licensed person, as well as the standard of care, so its purpose is to protect the consumer. The organization granting ASHA certification represents the professionals. It restricts the use of certification. It is reserved for SLPs who have met all of the qualifying requirements for education, professional experience, national practice exam, and professional characteristics. Licensure boards represent the state and are there to protect the consumers. Licensure is regulated by law, so it is illegal for unlicensed individuals to provide the services. The qualifications may mirror certification standards for ASHA, including formal education and coursework, praxis exam, and professional experience. The ASHA certification standards are developed by elected and appointed representatives of ASHA. The certification standards change across time as the profession changes. We are about to implement 2020 standards that add requirements for pediatric feeding, literacy, and supervision. For licensure, SLPs are represented by a state board, such as the Louisiana Board of Examiners for Speech-Language Pathology and Audiology, or LABESPA. LABESPA must work with the state legislature to assure that the rules are appropriate and protect the profession as well as the consumer. Members may be called to action by the board if legislatures are contemplating changes in licensure that would be detrimental to the profession. There are also differences in penalties. Both ASHA and licensure boards can issue penalties for violating the code of ethics or for breaking the rules. For ASHA, you can lose your certification or be publicly censored. Your name is publicized, etc., and there may be monetary penalties. The penalties for licensure are legal, including restrictions on your practice, suspension or revoking your license, fines, and even jail time. So licensure is a legal system and certification is a professional organization system. What's the difference between full versus provisional licensure? A full license in speech-language pathology is issued to people who meet the educational, clinical practicum, praxis examination, and professional experience requirements for full licensure. As a new graduate, you are going to have the educational, clinical practicum, and perhaps the praxis qualifications met, but you will not have the professional experience requirements for a full licensure. Both ASHA and licensure boards require a 9-month clinical fellowship or supervised year. They are not the same thing, and you must complete the forms and requirements for both. ASHA certification and state licensure. Until you are eligible for full licensure, you must have a provisional license. You must apply for this before you start your first job. A provisional license means that you have to practice under the direct supervision of a licensed speech-language pathologist. Certification requires that you have a clinical fellow mentor, and licensure requires that you also have a direct supervisor from a license that is a licensed SLP. Therefore, in your job search, it is critical to ask if the hiring agent can provide somebody who can serve as a supervisor for licensure and certification. So what are the qualifications of a person who can supervise a provisional SLP? Who does this supervision? The supervisor or mentor must have completed a minimum of 1 full year full-time professional SLP experience beyond completing their graduate degree. The person also must hold a current certificate of clinical competence throughout the year. So it's not enough for a person to hold a license. They also have to have completed their Cs. The 2020 standards also require the supervisor to have completed at least 2 CEUs specific to training in the area of supervision. Thus, you have to ask your potential supervisor if that person meets the training criteria as well. The procedure for applying for licensure will be similar in most states. Most states will have an online application system, but some may require a notarized application form. Your university must send an official college transcript. You must submit an official summary of your clinical practicum hours, including a breakdown of the hours, and of course you have to pay the licensing fee, which currently in Louisiana is $125. There is a 60-day grace period that begins the date the application is received by the board, where you can work without the license. Do not work even 1 day before submitting that application, or you will be in violation of the law. So you don't have to have your application processed before you start working, but you do have to have the application actually turned in, and then it has about a 60-day grace period to be processed. Do not go to work until you have completed that application and turned it in with the fee. What is supervision requirements for the provisional SLP? First, a supervision agreement form must be signed by the supervisor and the supervisee. Make sure that the supervising SLP meets all of the criteria. The agreement form must be submitted by the supervisee, meaning you, not your supervisor, within 30 days of employment. So you have to submit your application for provisional license before you ever start working, and then you have to have the supervision agreement form turned in within 30 days of employment. The state agency should be notified whenever a supervisory agreement is terminated. Some of you might have multiple job sites during your supervised year. For example, you may work part-time at a school or hospital and part-time at a private practice. This means that you are going to have multiple supervisors and supervisory agreements. Each of the supervisors must sign the agreement, or multiple agreements must be submitted. If there is a change in supervisors, a new agreement must be submitted to the board within 30 days. This was also true of your CF supervision. For every supervisor that you have and every site that you will use, you need an application for both licensure and your CF position. And if you change your supervisors, then you need to notify and get new paperwork signed for both licensure and certification. So what kinds of documentation and records are required for provisional licensure? The supervisor for a provisional license in Louisiana is documented on Form 100. Every state will have a similar document. It has to be submitted annually with renewal upon the provisional license status until it is upgraded. If you are working full-time, it would only be a 1-year process. But if you're working part-time, it could be 2 or 3 or even 4 years in the process, depending on how many hours you're completing each week. The supervision has to be documented on this form. On-site supervision is required for every work setting. So if you're working with a private practice and a hospital, then your supervision must be on-site at the private practice and on-site at the hospital setting. Supervisory records, including supervision logs and other documents of supervision, must be maintained by the supervisor and the supervisee for 3 years in case you are audited. Keep records of observations, conversations, dates the supervisor reviews files, and so forth. The typical supervision activity requirements include 12 activities annually, but check the rules and regulations of the state where you are working. At least 4 of the activities consist of on-site or in-view observations divided between diagnostics and management. For 12 months employees, 1 hour on-site observation must be conducted every quarter or for every 3 months. For a 9-month school year, it must be 2 observations each semester. Once you've completed your year, you are ready to upgrade the provisional license to a full license. You must initiate the upgrade with a letter of request, a passing score on the praxis from ETS, proof of supervision, proof of 36 weeks of employment from the employer on the company's letterhead, and of course the upgrade for fee payment. All right, so remember, you cannot work without supervision until you receive that official letter notifying you that your license has been upgraded. You cannot work independently. After you complete your CF and have full licensure, you must remain a learner. For both ASHA certification and licensure, you must complete continuing education. For ASHA certification, you must complete 30 hours every 3 years. The licensure CEU requirements vary across states. In Louisiana, it is 10 hours every year. In Texas, 20 hours every 2 years. CEUs are necessary because SLPs must engage in evidence-based practice. The profession and professional knowledge changes very quickly, and to provide state-of-the-art services, practitioners must remain current. CEU hours must include hours in speech pathology, but they can also be in areas related to the profession. For example, if you're working in a school and they provide an in-service on behavioral intervention or Common Core curriculum, that can count. If you work in a hospital or a rehab setting, a workshop addressing issues of OT and PT would be appropriate. If you have further questions about licensure in Louisiana, you have 2 options. You can review the Louisiana Licensure PowerPoint posted on the Community Student Moodle, or you can go to the LABESPA website. If you have just started your job search, the PANOPTO program, Getting a Job, ComD PANOPTO, is packed with great information. Also, the Louisiana Speech Language Hearing Association website has an excellent career center, and if you click on the link of the PowerPoint, it will take you directly to that site. I hope this discussion has helped you understand licensure, how it's similar to but very different from certification, and how important it is to make sure that you get the provisional license before you ever step into your job. Good luck and have a fabulous career. And don't forget about us. Join the LSU ComD Alumni Center.